The golden afternoon sun bathed Crescent Park in a warm glow, casting long shadows under the towering oak trees. Dylan sat cross-legged under his favorite tree, scrolling through his phone while waiting for his mom to pick him up. It was his usual spot, a place where he could unwind and feel safe after school. He adjusted his hoodie and leaned back against the tree, letting the cool shade ease the heat on his face. On a nearby bench, Mrs. Turner sat with her coffee cup clutched tightly in her hands. A longtime resident of the area, she was known for her sharp tongue and sharper eyes, always keeping tabs on the goings-on in the park. Today, her gaze was fixed squarely on Dylan. She sipped her coffee slowly, her mind racing. Who is this boy? She wondered. Dylan, tall and lean with his hoodie pulled up, didn't fit into the image of who she thought should be in the park. He wasn't on the playground. He wasn't jogging like some of the others. To her, he seemed out of place. Minutes ticked by, and Mrs. Turner's unease grew. She muttered to herself, "What's he doing just sitting there, watching people? That can't be right." She thought of news stories and warnings about being vigilant. Her imagination filled in the blanks with fears she couldn't quite articulate. "Better safe than sorry," she murmured. Standing up, she hesitated for a moment before walking toward him. "Young man!" she called out, her tone sharp. Dylan looked up, startled. "Yes, ma'am?" "What are you doing here?" she demanded. "This park is for families in the community. You've been sitting here for a long time without doing anything." Dylan blinked, confused. "I'm just waiting for my mom to pick me up," he said politely. "She's running late." Mrs. Turner didn't believe him. "It doesn't look like you're waiting for anyone," she said, crossing her arms. "If you don't leave now, I'll have no choice but to call the police." "Ma'am, I have every right to be here," Dylan said, his voice firm but calm. "I'm not bothering anyone." Her expression hardened. Pulling out her phone, she said, "We'll see about that." Dylan's heart raced as she dialed. "Yes," she said to the dispatcher. "I'd like to report a suspicious person in Crescent Park." The sound of sirens broke through the peaceful park just a few minutes later. 2 police cars pulled up near the entrance, their flashing lights painting the scene in red and blue. Dylan froze, his stomach sinking. He remembered his mom's words, "Stay calm, keep your hands visible, don't make sudden movements." The officers stepped out of their cars, their faces unreadable, but their movements cautious. One of them, Officer Grayson, approached Mrs. Turner first. "Ma'am, you called about a suspicious individual?" "Yes," she said quickly, pointing at Dylan. "That boy's been sitting there for over an hour, just watching people. It didn't seem right." Grayson nodded, his expression serious, and turned to Dylan. "Hey, kid," he said, his voice firm. "What are you doing here?" "I'm waiting for my mom," Dylan replied, his voice steady, despite the fear creeping up his spine. "Do you have any ID?" the second officer, Officer Perez, asked. "No, sir," Dylan said. "I'm 15. "Do you have your mom's number? Can we call her to confirm?" Perez asked. "It's in my phone," Dylan said, careful not to move. "But I don't want to reach for it without your permission." Perez raised a hand. "Just stay still, son. We'll sort this out." The tension in the air was palpable. A small crowd began to gather, some murmuring among themselves, others pulling out their phones to record. Mrs. Turner stood to the side, her arms crossed, feeling vindicated. Before the situation could escalate further, the roar of an engine drew everyone's attention. A sleek silver car screeched to a halt near the police cruisers. The door opened and a woman in a tailored suit stepped out, her heels clicking on the pavement with purpose. Gasps rippled through the crowd as they recognized her. Mayor Evelyn Carter. The officers straightened immediately. "Ma'am," Grayson began, "we were responding to a report of a suspicious individual." "This suspicious individual is my son," Mayor Carter interrupted, her voice sharp and unwavering. Dylan felt a wave of relief wash over him as his mom placed a protective hand on his shoulder. Suspicious? She repeated, her voice rising slightly. Suspicious for what? Sitting under a tree? Waiting for me? Or is it because he's black? Mrs. Turner's face turned pale. I didn't know, she stammered. I was just trying to— No, the mayor cut her off, her eyes blazing. You didn't know, you didn't ask, you just assumed. Turning to the officers, she said, And you? Did you stop to question the validity of her call? Or did you come here ready to treat my son like a criminal because someone said he was suspicious? The officers shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. Mayor Carter addressed the growing crowd. This is the problem, she said, her voice carrying across the park. Bias like this doesn't just harm individuals, it divides our community. My son is lucky today because I'm the mayor. But what about the children whose parents don't have this platform? Who protects them? The crowd was silent, the weight of her words sinking in. In the days that followed, the incident became a flashpoint for the community. Mayor Carter announced mandatory anti-bias training for all city employees, including law enforcement. The story sparked conversations at town halls and around dinner tables, forcing residents to confront uncomfortable truths about prejudice and assumptions. For Dylan, the experience was life-changing. He joined a youth advocacy group, using his voice to share his story and push for change. He learned that speaking up could make a difference, even when it was scary. Weeks later, a mural appeared in the park. It depicted intertwined hands of all colors holding a single flame. Beneath it were the words, "Unity begins with understanding." Dylan and his mom visited the mural often, taking solace in knowing that their experience had sparked a conversation, a vital one that could light the way to a brighter, more inclusive future.
After all, sometimes the bravest thing isn't holding on to anger, but being willing to let it go one small piece at a time, even when forgiveness feels impossible. And maybe that's where healing truly begins, not in forgetting the past, but in finding the strength to face it and perhaps, in time, to forge something new from its ashes.